yourself comfortable. And my gorgeous Mediterranean wife is joining us, and Glenn. So Glenn said to us he was not going to do the interview unless he got some Earl Grey. So it's on its way because he's truly English. We've got it. And for you, Soph, I don't know whether you drink Earl Grey or do you drink real tea?
No, I sit next to her all the time.
I drink real tea, but I can do Earl Grey.
That's good.
I can adapt. I'm not a diva. I'm not a diva like my husband.
I believe you started drinking Earl Grey in COVID. Why was that?
I wanted to try new things. So I started learning Spanish and I started drinking Earl Grey, and they seem to go hand in hand, so... Yeah.
That is remarkably...
Cultured people, I feel, drink Earl Grey.
They do now, but before you used to, like, tell people that
yes.
they weren't...
Yeah.
It wasn't a good thing to drink Earl Grey.
In fact, you used some phrases which I cannot repeat publicly
Yeah.
when Byron ordered Earl Grey once.
I think he had Lady Grey. I think that's what it was.
Come on, here's the Earl Grey. Give them all a hand. Here we go. So,
thank you so much.
This session is things that we can create as leaders. And while the Earl Grey gets delivered, we will be really setting the tone. What I love about this... Yeah, will you say that in Spanish for us, sir?
Sí, gracias.
Yeah, there we go.
Gracias para mi agua con
So are you excited about Earl Grey?
Y caliente.
Are you excited about Real Madrid beating Man City tonight?
It's like a resounding gong and cymbal clanging in my ears.
I didn't know that you could swear in Spanish as well.
Oh, yeah, I can. That were the first words Sophie taught me, actually.
There's true love. So this session is all about things we create as leaders. And I think we all agree, if you've ever had the opportunity, and I really want to strongly encourage you to do this, if you've ever had an opportunity to visit Audacious Church, you'll get... I think there's something different when you visit a church from when you hear someone speak and communicate without seeing their church. Once you see their church, there's a whole lot of context that gets added. And Glenn and Soph have built a remarkable church. In fact, if we go back, I don't know, it was probably 2000. When did you plant? 2007, I think it was? Yeah, there was a moment in 2006 when Pastor Andre Willefear and I were in Malaga. We were traveling together, and Glenn was in the same vicinity in the same conference. And I remember a breakfast that we had or a lunch that we had, and Glenn was talking to Pastor Andre about the things that he would do if he was planting a church again. And he asked a whole lot of really, really incredible questions. And you consider that in 2006, 2007, that's really where you were to where you are today, and the wonderful movement that you've created. It's not just a church; it's a movement that's shaping the UK. And, it's pretty much what Byron was talking about earlier today, the impact and the impetus you've had as leaders. So I think we can all learn significantly from leaders who have created something from scratch, which is in and of itself quite remarkable. Many of us in the room have done that. But what you've done is something really, really unique as the both of you. Musically, creatively, artistically, spiritually, it's a massive, massive help to many of us around the world, and we are truly grateful for you. But before we get to the serious stuff, some quick fire questions, just to kind of loosen up a little. So I want to ask you, what's your favorite holiday destination? Either one of you can fire. In fact, say it together. Maybe this will be interesting. 1, 2, 3.
Malaysia.
Well, there you go. So what did you say?
The beach.
And you said, oh, well, that's okay.
Yeah, there's this island that we love to go to off the coast of Malaysia, and it's just got great memories for us as a family. So it's a beach. Yeah.
That's a good recovery.
It's beautiful. It's one of those ones that have got like the stilts, the houses on stilts.
Nice.
Yeah.
Favorite food type?
Steak.
You're true South
Hang on,
Africans
is this
at heart.
Mr. and Mrs.? Is that what it is? Do we have to...
It seems to be going that way. Nikki.
Yeah, I know.
Nicola. Ask your question, Nicola.
My question. Am I on? Is it really on? Oh, wow. I didn't hear myself. That's bizarre. That's very unusual. Okay, so what's your most exhilarating experience? Both of you. That's a really good question.
When I think I was 37, for my birthday...
No, you were 35. You were 35 because you were struggling with midlife crisis, I remember. and I wanted to make you stay young. Feel like you were young. You are young. I'm gonna go.
I think it's better I'm sitting in between
Glenn
the
bought
two of
me
you now.
plastic surgery. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. So I've always wanted to skydive, and Glenn said no, like again and again. He said no.
Not
you
until
can't.
I had my son in air. That was the idea.
And then we had our son, and I thought, and then all of a sudden I can skydive. I was like, okay, I see why this is happening. So that was skydiving, tandem jump.
Fantastic.
Oh,
Did you man up and do the same thing?
There's no chance in the world I'm going to jump out of a perfectly good plane. If it's got flames and I've got a parachute, then I'll jump. But no, why would you do that?
So what was your most exhilarating experience?
Listen, I've ridden motorbikes through Mongolia on a few occasions, and every time is spectacular. I remember one time just coming down a mountain, and there were condors that were nesting in the long grass, and they took off. The wingspans were amazing. And then at the bottom of the mountain, we hit this forest, and as the lead riders were going through, millions of butterflies just took to flight. But the trees were in blossom as well, so the blossoms were coming down, butterflies coming up, condors flying over here. And I remember just stopping the motorbike, the guys rode off, and I just sat there thinking, this is the most spectacular thing. That was exhilarating, without a doubt. Yeah.
Next question. Favorite band and why?
Oh, gosh, so many good choices.
I know.
Did I tell you I met Elton John? Did I tell you that? I think probably one of my all-time favourites would be Def Leppard.
Oh, very
I
cool.
agree with you. I think that's brilliant.
Vocals
Yes.
and guitars are stunning. Yeah.
Heavy metal.
it's too hard. It's too hard. It's too. Glenn, help me. Yeah, I love Bon Jovi. I do love Bon Jovi. I reckon Coldplay is one of the best one of the most, in a stadium, unbelievable. But there's loads. Too many.
Because you guys
Too
are
many.
right. I mean, the stadium right near your church, you must have been seeing many concerts there.
I mean, U2.
Yeah.
U2's
Seen U2 a few
stunning.
times.
If you're talking about a live experience, it would be U2, it would be Bon Jovi, it'd be Coldplay, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. So now listen, we've got a couple of sections.
And the Gaithers.
And the who?
The Gaithers. Sorry, I forgot we had AOG group conference. Gaithers and...
Carmen.
I think the two of you should sing their
Byron, what else
greatest
did you
hits.
say?
I love Carmen.
Amy Grant, is that what you said?
Amy Grant.
Yeah.
Michael W. Smith.
I did have a picture of Amy Grant on my wall when I was a teenager. She was my first love.
I won't go there. No, moving right along. Some serious question. We're going to be looking at four things, four, I guess, segments that were, I think, really helpful. We're going to look at self-leadership, what it looks like, what kinds of things we should create in our self-leadership, staff and volunteer leadership as well. I think each and every one of us can learn, firstly, from how we should lead ourselves so that we can lead our volunteers and staff better. And then church leadership, of course, creative teams, and then one question around marriage and working together. And I would imagine that's quite pertinent to most of us, so hopefully we'll get through them all. But Nick is going to kick us off with self-leadership.
So essentially, if we were to look at leadership and the platform on how one would begin doing it, where does it actually start? You know, like where would your number one platform launching off, where would creativity really start? How would we start off the whole process of creativity in leadership? Yeah.
I think as a leader, having the space to think is one of the most important things in terms of creativity and leadership. I'm sure that your diaries, like ours, just, can be so full of things. We can almost lurch from one thing to another, and yet without the space to actually begin to think creatively. So for us with our church, when we launched 16 years ago, the question we had was, thinking about our city, thinking about creatively how we were going to present church to the city, we realised that our city had 1,100 churches and the average size church was 12. So we thought, okay, there's lots of churches. People don't want to go to churches. Where do people want to go? They want to go to football and to parties. So what would it look like for church to both embody football and a party all in one place? So, we have a theology of football that's taken straight out of Scripture. It's all of the book of Ephesians. What does it mean to be in Christ? Entheos. meaning to rave, to go into raptures, to go overboard. You know, if you look at a football game, you look tonight when we beat Real Madrid 4-0, you know, there's going to be raving, there's going to be raptures, people going overboard, you know. And so what does it look like for church to embody that party, sense of party? Reverence, yes, but I think we misunderstand what reverence means. I think we think that to be reverent means to be quiet. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Reverence means to give God what he's worth. So how do we creatively put things in a way that embodies that? And that really did come out of a sense of stopping, thinking, creating the space to think about how we can present the gospel to a now generation. But in an ongoing space, we definitely need to have space to stop and think about things. For me, it happens when I'm mowing the lawn, doing DIY or pottering. I call it pottering, where I'm not doing anything in the house, but I'm doing something. So says, what are you doing? I'm pottering. And it's just because my brain is somewhere else, but I need to do something for my brain to work properly.
And yourself?
For me, I'm just going to make it more principle-based in the sense that leadership is the call of God mixed with obedience.
So
I think that's what it is. I think if you just I think anybody is a leader who's made a decision to say yes to Jesus when he asks something of you, or when you feel the nudge of the Holy Spirit, when you get a God thought, whatever that may be. I think the minute you say yes and you step forward, you're exercising leadership. And I think for a young person or a young leader, it's that simple. And I don't think that ever changes. You're just doing it for longer, and maybe it looks different in different seasons, but the principle's the same. Lord, you know, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to say? Where do you want me to go? And the answer's always yes. I think that's leadership. Yeah, that's the
So
beginning.
just, if you don't mind, can I just expand on something quickly? You spoke about, you know, you're saying yes. So if you're saying yes, that whenever you say yes to leadership, that's when it begins. Glenn, you mentioned that you create time to think. Both of those have a little bit of a practical outworking too, in a very busy schedule. I mean, I think you're traveling 10 days of every month. You're busy. There's lots on the plate. How do you create room for that? What are you doing to create room to think? How do you say yes to the right things? What are you guys doing about that? How does that translate into practical activity?
Crisis usually brings me to a place of needing to think. Usually when there's a problem, I know I've missed something, so therefore that necessitates that I need to create now the space to think, okay, how did we get into this situation, and what do we now practically need to do creatively even to get out of this situation? So it's usually a reaction to bad things, actually, that triggers me.
Or frustration.
Sophie's a little bit more proactive. She's more on the front foot. I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about being a prescient leader ahead of the time. Sophie's actually more that. I'm more, oh gosh, we need to fix something, and then stepping in.
Cool.
Can I just add
Yes.
to that? One thing that I hear a lot is about self-care. I think people talk about self-care a lot. I think it's a reaction to kind of like the busyness and you know, being productive and being successful, that a lot of people saying, you know, you need to look after yourself. And I would say that in leadership, we do not give ourselves enough time, not necessarily for what they're talking about. When they talk about self-care, they're talking about, you know, health and all that kind of stuff, but I'm talking about heart health. I'm amazed at how many leaders that I meet who have literally very little self-awareness. Like they don't even know where their own heart is at, or they don't know that they're limping through life crippled by an insecurity, or crippled by a trauma, or crippled by unbelief, or crippled by something that they've been carrying. No idea. You know, they'll literally go to the conferences and they'll read the books and they'll, you know, do the techniques and you know, they'll have their planners and their you know, their schedules and their meetings and But I think that as a leader, it is so important, especially when we're talking about longevity, we're talking about what true success is. is that we get to know our heart
Yeah.
and we do our heart homework. I believe everybody's got their own heart homework. And for some people it's easy, for others it's not. But I believe that you can do whatever it takes. You can find a person that you can talk to in order to give you some insight into where you are and what God is doing in your heart. Yeah.
You've touched on something that'll kind of lead us to another question. We'll skip a few, but this is an important question, I think, that ties to what you're talking about. And that is, when you look at a senior leader's responsibility, we all have different roles that we perform. We have tasks that need to be taken care of. In your opinion, what are responsibilities as senior leaders for you personally that are things that only you should be doing? Other things can be delegated and outsourced, but what are the things that, I guess, tied to this whole weight of leadership that are the non-negotiables that you need to take care of?
Big picture vision and culture. So I think that if culture is the vehicle that takes you to your destination, then it's important for the senior leader to be able to clearly articulate, the clear image of a preferable future that we talk about in the context of vision, to hold that, to be guardians of that, and guardians of the vehicle, our culture, the whys and the wherefores. I think beyond that, pretty much everything can be delegated. But they're the most important things I believe that a senior pastor needs to hold on to and keep close to their chest. So my frustrations arise whenever, things transpire in the life of the church that are outside the bounds of what our cultural context is. This is our culture.
Yeah.
This is the way we do things. And therefore there's a language that's associated with that. And so usually the language that I hear from teams tell us whether or not we're on point or we're shifting away from the culture. And it's what Paul said to Timothy: instruct people in a sound pattern of teaching. So the idea is this, is that I think in the life of our church, any journey, the best way to get anywhere is from A to B. The best way to get from Manchester to Cape Town is on a direct flight. But for some reason, the night before, we went Manchester, Doha, Cape Town. That's not a direct flight. And I think part of the reasons why it can be slow to build church at times is we're going all over the place. Instead of actually having, we know where we're going, and we're going to get there by doing A, B, C, D, E, straight line. And culture's important, the way what we preach, the songs we sing, the programs that we roll out, all that comes out of a combination of the vision and the culture. So when I see a church that oscillates from we're all small church, now, no, we're not, we're all celebration, no, we're just micro church, you kind of go, okay, we're trying to get to Cape Town, but we're going via Doha, Sydney, New York.
Very good.
Ulaanbaatar, and we're lost because we're not. So for me, it's vision and culture, always.
I would add to that, culture is incredibly important. In a family, culture is court. When you've got proximity to the senior leader, people will catch your culture because they'll hear it's how you say it, it's what you do, it's what you prioritize, all of that kind of stuff. But in a church context, I think the most valuable thing that we can do as senior leaders is learn to articulate culture. Because sometimes there's no proximity or there's little proximity to the senior leader. And so then the onus is on us to start to think, okay, culture is so instinctive. I need to figure out what this is and learn to articulate it in a way where people can actually catch it. So it's the things like, this is what we do and this is what we don't do. This is how we speak, this is how we don't speak. Yes. This is how we praise and this is how we don't praise. This is what we declare and this is what we don't declare. This is how we volunteer and this is how we don't volunteer. It's that kind of level of articulation that really breeds strength. And I think it only comes from the senior leader. I think you've got to realize that beyond you, it will start to leak. It will start to dilute. And you've got to keep reiterating, and keep bringing back to who we are and what we do.
I think what we're hearing potentially is this concept that we create the environments we find ourselves in, and we've got to be clear on what we're creating. And I think that's what's so powerful about what Glenn and Soph have built in Audacious, is that the culture is extraordinarily clear. when you walk into the building, when you walk into the foyer, when you walk into the auditorium, when you hear the worship, when you hear the teaching, when you speak to the team, the culture is irrevocably clear. It's precise, it's exact, and it's carried with everyone. So that's clearly what we're hearing, the idea that we need to watch culture. Next.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir.
Can I just feel like this is so important. This is like, can I just double down a little bit?
Yes.
If you are not articulating your culture and you are not protecting it, promoting it, celebrating it, embodying it, if you're not doing that, somebody else is.
So good.
I think you're brilliant at this, babe, in articulating it. But if you're not doing it, somebody is doing it. And whoever is dictating culture is the real leader.
So maybe if you kind of want a little bit more on that, I do a message called Leadership Atmosphere, and just do Google my name, Leadership Atmosphere, and it'll come up somewhere in the world that I've done it. And it's this whole idea that it's the real leader who sets the atmosphere in the place. And the thing about atmosphere is tangible. So if you're staying, with Byron and his lovely wife, and they're having an argument, and you don't know they're having an argument, but you're staying in the guest room, and while they're having an argument, you leave the guest room to walk down to where they are in the lounge room having an argument. They hear you coming. You walk into the room. They've stopped having an argument, but as soon as you walk in, you say, "Morning, guys," and they look at you. You look at them. They look at you. You look at them. Nobody needs to say a word, and you just say, "We'll come back later, shall we?" Because atmosphere is a tangible thing. It's in the air. It's not visible, but it's there. And it's the real leader who determines what the atmosphere is. Now, Paul also says to Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. And I always thought it was about setting an example. But in actual fact, leadership's found in those first two words, don't let. In other words, Timothy, you feel small, you feel intimidated because you have given somebody else the permission to intimidate you. Take it back, don't let it happen. So the leader is actually creating the permissions for what's taking place in the church. And I would go so far as to say that if you've been in the church longer than 5 years, then everything that's great, you've done, and everything that's bad, you've done. You're responsible for the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that really pains me after 16 years, that everything that is so bad, Sophie did.
Helpful, right? Come on, that's a great answer. So is this being helpful?
Very good.
We're going to change tact a little, and we're going to tackle some staff and volunteer leadership, of which Glenn has rudely answered the questions before we got to them. But the second question Nick is going to just touch on. This is really, really important. Next.
So if you're looking at atmosphere and culture, obviously it's something that is important and it's vital, and it comes from a leadership perspective. But what are those universal cultures that leaders need to create in order to foster that ongoing atmosphere of the culture? Is it going to be something that stays stagnant, or how do we improve it from one level to the next? You create that atmosphere, and you might be getting a 20% there, but you actually want to get to 100%. How do we improve it to that point where you want to get it to your 100% of the atmosphere and culture that you're looking for?
Well, I think the cultural points that we're after is what the Bible calls the fruit of the Spirit, firstly. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, long-suffering, self-control. I said to our movement of churches last year, I'm less interested in your ability to speak in tongues and more interested in you showing the fruit of the Spirit. I think it's a two-step thing. It's one foot, spiritual gifts, the other foot, fruit of the Spirit, and those things need to go hand in hand. So when we're talking about culture, I think a lot of our culture is actually the manifestation of the fruit of the Spirit. But in terms of making sure that it stays there and it's always in the air and it's always part of who we are, I don't think you can go beyond modelling it, being the example, never being caught out, stepping outside the bounds of the cultural nuances that you want to have in the life of the church. And when we as leaders do, to actually hold our hands up and say, really sorry, that was a little bit out of order. And I can say that because on Saturday night, I sent an apology, gave an apology to one of my team members who's been with us for 20 plus years. Said, hey mate, I'm really sorry about that. I was just, I crossed the line. We shouldn't have had that conversation. I was frustrated about something, and I talked to him in a way that was short, it was curt, and asked for his apology. That apology, me crossing the line, and then my apology is almost as good, or maybe even better, than just consistently doing the right thing. Because even pulling myself up is actually pulling him up at the same time. But the spotlight's on me. I missed it. And so I think modelling an example is really huge.
That's great, babe. I would say prayer. Prayer is the secret sauce to everything. We work hard. We work hard with our articulation of culture. We work hard with our commitment to excellence. We work hard with our programs. We work hard with our evangelism. We work hard with our discipleship. We work hard with our everything that we do. I mean, we've got just something that's happened recently. A GP, a general practitioner, a doctor in our church has just become one of our PAs. I know. It's like, what? You know, for different reasons.
It's great because she gets me free drugs. It's amazing. No.
It's great. Any ailments, any aches and pains, we're like, what's this, Becky? You know. So, but having said that, she has had a window. She said, I had no idea how hard you guys work. We literally go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. We are like on the go. And there's the travel. It's just her mind was blown at our work ethic and what we do. So we work hard. But the way that we always bring it back to what's important, when we bring it back to the priorities and why we do what we do, there's no other way, and that is through prayer. And so fostering a culture of prayer in the life of the church from the bottom to the top to bottom is invaluable.
And being able to articulate in those prayer gatherings some of our frustrations where it feels like we as a church are missing the mark, and trying to say, hey, there's this aspect that we are wanting to pray into, because as a church we're coming below the median line of what we would expect in this cultural area. So having all of our intercessors and all of our prayer teams praying into those things is a continual reminder on the culture as well. So yeah, it's everything to us.
What are you doing to create that? You spoke clearly about articulating these things as well, but what are you doing to create that sense of prayer? Obviously, you and your team are bathing everything in prayer, but what are you doing to articulate that in the church? What kinds of things do you do? What practical activities do you put in place to make that work?
Well, we've been talking about the idea of the concept of turning up the spiritual temperature in the life of our church, and so that's articulated throughout our leadership. That we are, as a church, turning up the spiritual temperature. And the only way that we do that is through prayer. So we have dedicated times throughout the 12-month calendar where we say, right, we are praying and fasting. You know, so a good time to do it is in kickoff season. So our kickoff is, we have two basically, because of the where we are in the world. So we've got September, which is our kickoff into autumn and our academic year, so that we do a prayer emphasis throughout the life of the church at that time. And we have another one in our January, February, and in March. So March, we've decided we're going to do 21 days of prayer and fasting, which leads us up into Easter. So having those dedicated prayer emphasis, and we talk about prayer, we preach on prayer, and we have, like, we elevate prayer, we add more prayer meetings, we make it more accessible for people. We do Zoom prayer. We make sure that every person, every department is upping their prayer. We plan for it, we strategize for it, and we check it. So every line manager is looking at their people and saying, how are you elevating prayer? How are you growing in this area? And so just that constant talk and that constant priority is it starts to feed into everything that we're doing.
We have intercessory prayer teams that are praying all through everything. So all of our Sunday meetings, we'll have a dedicated team of people who are praying through all of the services. But also on top of that, we beyond the prayer gatherings, it's something we've actually done in our movement, AOG, as well. So 4 years ago, when I became the national leader, I said, we want to rediscover our Pentecostal roots. And the Pentecostal roots started in prayer. And so what does it mean for us as a movement of churches to begin to pray again? So we've elevated prayer nationally. So we have national prayer days. We have national days of prayer and fasting and different things. But, our national conference was last week, and we would have had somewhere in the region of 350, 400 pastors every morning just gathered in the early morning prayer meeting, just calling out to God. And even going down to the coronation on Saturday, the intercessory prayer teams in Assemblies of God were texting me saying, hey, we're praying, this is what we're believing, this is what's on our heart. So we've actually elevated not just prayer, but the voice of the prophet in the midst as well. So what's God saying? So prayers are speaking to God, then the voice of the prophet is God speaking back to us. So what we've actually done last week was we've elevated this prophetic office in the national leadership team. They're not on the national leadership team, but they sit alongside us. And so the prayer teams gather, the prophets are in the midst. And when they feel like God is speaking, they actually pick up the phone and say, hey, Glenn, we're really feeling God saying this right now. And it's all coming out of a place of prayer in the presence of God. It's everything to us. It's our oxygen.
So I think one of the things that we've been talking about in our church as well is the importance of prayer and elevating the importance of prayer. And I think what we have an opportunity to understand as leaders is that we get to create that again. Everything is created. What you get, what you create. And if we are creating the right things, we'll get the right results. And again, once again, it's evident in what you guys are doing. So I think this is helpful, right? You're being helped? Really, really important. Thank you for that. Changing tact once again, looking at church leadership a bit differently now, and really exploring that. I think most of us, you guys are building a great building. You're about to embark on a new activity. And what scares me when I listen to you is that we as a church, when we're looking at the complexities, we look at the value, the rand value, and go, gee, that's quite a lot. And then you come and tell me what you're doing, and we're multiplying that by 20 and going, it's like buying an ice cream for us. But in real terms, so maybe start with you. How do you create the culture of generosity in your church? Obviously, the economy is different today, post-COVID. What kinds of things are you putting in place to create that culture?
I think we have to challenge our people to be generous. I think it's a spirit that wars against the church that keeps us contained. And I'm not saying that people are sitting on a wad of cash and they're not giving it to the church. That's not what I'm saying. I know people are dealing with less and the challenges are real, but we have to prophetically keep speaking generosity because I'm so passionate about this. I have no problem taking up an offering. I have no problem speaking on giving because it's our inheritance as God's people that it's a spiritual tool in our armory, and we can shift the heavenlies through generosity. We can break binds and walls come down through our praise. It's a generous act, and through our prayer, which is a generous act, and through our time and through our energy. We are a generous people, and I think we've got to keep challenging our people to exercise it and to and to be open. That if God's saying go beyond what you've done, to do that. That's the only way I believe that we can be this light on the hill, and to be this movement that takes ground. Is people who are willing and open and consistently sacrificially giving in every area and whatever God's asking them to do.
You're not passionate about that one, are you? Listen, there are two things I think that keep the church small, two prevailing spirits without getting too spooky. The spirit of religion, which is where we do things based on what we think other people think. And the other one is the spirit of poverty. Not blessed are the poor in spirit, but a poverty mindset. Yeah. And the reality is this: is last year, 2021, Christians gave 1.9% of their income to the house of God globally. That's a global stat. Now, usually what happens is this in England, and come and take the offering for us sometime and you'll feel it, even in our church. The moment you mention we're going to take an offering, it is squeaky bum time. People hold the money so tight that the Queen cries. Because we haven't got notes with the king on it yet, okay? She's crying because it's like this. And it's a prevailing spirit. Now, here's the thing, right, is that when you break down giving, and I would urge you to do this, break down giving. I think at this moment in time, our church, the giving units in our church equal out to around 98 pounds and 60 pence a month per giving unit in the life of our church. That means, on average, we are giving 98 pounds and 60 pence a month. Okay, or 96.80, whatever it was, which basically means this: there's a heck of a lot of people in our church who are not giving.
Yeah.
And if they're not giving, they're not going to get the breakthrough. They're just not. And it's not about money, it's always about heart. So when people come up and say, why do you always emphasize the offering in our church? I say, what are you talking about, you idiot? We emphasize everything. We emphasize the band, cleanliness. We emphasize the heating. We emphasize the car parking. That's why no one's stealing your cars today. We emphasize kids' church. We emphasize everything. And I say, why are you emphasizing the money? It's because you're a tight-fisted, stingy, poverty-minded English Christian, you know? And there's almost a sense where we've got to get indignant about it, have an indignance in our spirit, and just keep on labouring the point. So our goal this year is to move from 98 pounds and 60 pence per person per month and see if we can get it to 99 pounds per person per month. Now, that's only a 40p lift per giving unit, but when you put that in amongst 4,000 people per month, then we're talking about a substantial change. But genuinely, I think a move of God, an evidence of the move of God, is not just the Asbury revival of people just in the presence of God, and that's beautiful, and I'm all for that. But it's that passage in the Bible. The leaders stopped them from giving because there was already more than enough to build. That kind of thing. And anyway. You started that passion.
I get indignant with anything that holds back the church.
It really does.
And this is a big one.
So here's what people do, right, in England, is that young adults will say, oh, Pastor Glenn, I'm buying a house. And I'll say, fantastic. How much is the house? And they'll say £200,000. Just, I don't know what it breaks down as. £200,000. And I'll say, oh, brilliant. Why are you spending £200,000 on a house? And they'll say, well, we have a £30,000 deposit and we have a £170,000 mortgage. Do you use the term mortgage?
Yeah.
30,000, and you put it together, and it's 200,000. I'm like, that's fantastic, but why are you buying a house for 200,000? And they say, well, we've got a 30,000 pound deposit and a 170,000 pound mortgage. You put it together. I said, no, I know the maths. In America, they call it math because they only do it once, but we call it maths because we do it more than once. You know, I know the maths. Well, why are you spending 200,000? They're like, well, we just explained it. But the word mortgage, you'll know this, comes from the Latin phrase death grip. Mort, death, gauge, grip. And so what we have is we, the church, we buy houses, apartments, we build buildings based on what the death grip says, instead of going to God and say, God, what's the inheritance? What land are you giving us? What opportunity is before us? Because the Bible says it's only by faith we please God. Not with the mortgage, not with the bond, not with what the bank says. And if we can teach people in the basics of buying houses, in the basics of the way they use credit cards and things like that, then we can teach them what it also is to be generous in church. What do? 18,000 hours or something of schooling. And how many of you know they don't teach money in our primary schools and high schools and universities? Do you know why? It's because the rich are making the rules for the poor, and the goal is the rich want to keep the poor poor, and the way they keep the poor poor is by getting loans with ridiculous interest. You know all about that, don't you?
So sticking with buildings and mortgages and leadership, essentially, one of the ways, I guess, to increase generosity is to cast vision, and that's what leaders, are. It's what one of the things that we sort of cast vision to illustrate to people what it is that they're giving into as well. So, in terms of casting vision, how do we keep that vision exciting and vibrant and dynamic without it thinking that people are giving it a vision which is just a building, or it's just a bricks and mortar, but it's actually beyond that. It's more than that. It's live. It's, you know, something that God wants us to do. It's the God's vision. How do we keep that, you know, vibrant and powerful?
Creativity, I think, is the answer, isn't it? It's. I think our people don't get bored with the vision. We just get bored feeling like we're saying the same thing over and over again. So it's about trying to find for us different campaigns or different statements or different ways of trying to paint the same picture so that our people, the end goal is still the same, but a new creative way to think about it has been really key for us. So we've done everything from brick campaigns to seat campaigns to gym campaigns, like lots of different things. But I think one of the things that has continually helped our church is to model it, really. So I think in 2017, when we first launched our building program, we just said, hey, Soph and I, we're going to give a year's salary this year. We're going to give this year's salary into the building campaign. So things like that have made people sit up over the years and go, oh gosh, if they're doing that, what can we do? And trying to champion people who have got stories of faith associated with their sacrifice and surrender, whether it be the widow's mite, you know, portion, that it doesn't look like a lot of money, but what it's taken them to do that, all the way through to business people who've done crazy things, people who forego didn't have their vacations or sold cars or whatever it was to celebrate those extravagant moments of generosity, of sacrifice. Those sorts of things have been, I think, really key for us in the last 6 years of trying to get our cathedral off the ground. And we're still not there. And so I'm bored. And if I'm bored, I've got to find more and more creative ways to keep it alive.
I think the flip side of Glenn's statement about, we're just finding new language and we need the creativity for that. But I think we've got to keep the excitement of the gospel really high and the purpose of the church really high and the excitement that God is redeeming the planet very high, that God he's brought redemption, but he's using his church to take back what was lost, and that whole narrative of Jesus needing to die and coming for his people. He's coming for people, and there is nothing more exciting than seeing a life transformed and somebody coming from death to life. I think we need to keep that excitement high and that idea that we, from the least to the greatest, from the youngest to the oldest, that is our purpose in life. It doesn't matter if you're a dentist. It doesn't matter if you're a single mom. We are all called to reach the lost. And I think we've got to keep that really, really high. And also we've got to capture the imagination of our business people. One of the frustrations I think every senior leader will say is how much money is given to parachurch organizations. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong. But the reason is because it's vision. Yeah. We're saving the children. Yes. We're saving, I don't know what we're doing. We're doing high schools or whatever, we're doing, like that. And I believe in that and I love that. And I love, modern day slavery. Yes. We can give to that. But as senior leaders, we have to capture the imagination of our business people for the gospel.
Yeah, come on.
For the local church. Yeah. And it is the church that is the hope of the world. And so, I feel that we are learning how to do that.
I've talked to some Christian philanthropists actually on this, and they've said one of the reasons why they don't give to local church is because the local church is not presenting a vision that's big enough that causes them to salivate. Yeah. So a friend of ours in the UK, a philanthropist rang him and said, I want to give you £500,000, but you have to spend it in the next month. What would you spend it on? And he couldn't think of what to spend it on. He could only spend up to, I think, 220 grand. And the philanthropist says, listen, if you can't spend it, I'll find someone who can. I said to my friend, why didn't you phone me? You know what I mean? I think, guys, we've got to have this vision that is way out there, beyond where we're at. Good. So that people can go, I want to be a part of that. Yeah. I want to be a part of that. And I think that will be a brilliant.
Don't you just love the passion? Yes. This is what the local church should be like. And, I look at the construct of our churches all across the country. And the one thing that remains true is if the vision's not big enough, the resource will not flow. And we have to think big and really think big. And I think in our lives, certainly, every time I think Nix and I have failed in the area of casting vision adequately, or we haven't cast a big enough vision, we've watched how the income over time has slowly started to shift, and we've had to stir ourselves to think differently and think bigger and expose ourselves to bigger things. And that's just, again, listening to you guys reaffirm that is just really, really stunning. Well, little change of tact again. So I've had the great privilege of being in your church a couple of times and really in awe of how talented your creative arts team are. I don't know whether you remember a couple of conferences ago, you spoke to your team, you were on the platform, it was a conference, and you said to the team, remember that song we sang 20 years ago? And you asked the guys to rehash the song, and they made up the lyrics as they went along, and it was amazing. But it was amazing to me how the team was so in tune with the creative skill set, musically, audiovisually. What is your philosophy, if you like, your creative bent? What kinds of things do you look for when you're creating some kind of a creative space? Because obviously we're trying to avoid the gimmicky things, but we want it to be creative for a purpose and creative for meaning. But there's more to it, I guess, as well. But how do you guys manage that? What are you looking for? What do you delegate? What do you hold close to your heart?
The ability to turn to a worship leader and say that is obviously dependent on the length of time that the worship leader has been saved and around. One of my frustrations that I've got actually currently on that, Trev, is that some of our people who are leading worship have only been around 3 minutes and only saved 2 and leading worship for 1. You know, so if I was to go, hey, listen, do you remember that old song, It Is Well With My Soul? They're like, no, you know. We sang Holy this morning, didn't we? And it's like, I'm like, oh my gosh, it took me back 30 years, and it's an epic song. So I think there are times when I feel like my creativity is actually, stunted based on the people's experience, you know, how long they've been around. When Matt, for example, one of our guitarists is leading worship, I know I can pick any song from any era, any style, any time, and he will do it. He's just brilliant. But his ability depends on which sound engineer we've got on. And I can tell straight away with our 8 sound engineers, I know exactly who's on, sitting on the front row. First song, I go, I know who's on. And I know how frustrated I'm going to be preaching today because he puts too much compression on and all these sorts of things. So there is a sense where you get to know your team and you can play with your strengths of your team. But the flexibility actually beyond that comes down to this, is that we don't want to be a program-driven church. We are very much time sensitive because we want to honour people's time, and also we have multiple services that takes place as well. But through the whole thing, Trev, we're hunting the presence of God.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. It's not about getting through the set list. It's not about doing the altar call at a certain time. It's about hunting the presence of God and being able to flex the creative muscles in church to be able to navigate to that moment at that time in order to do it. So flexibility is absolutely key. It's the rule, the program, the set list is the rule of thumb, but it's flexible.
I would say that as a church, we need to reclaim creativity again. So if you zoom out and you look at church history, it was the church that was in the forefront of art,
Yes.
of architecture, of beauty. The church brought beauty to the world. And I believe that in our modern day, you know, industrial, maybe chic,
Graffiti driven.
I don't know. I just think we need to call out the creativity in the church again. There are people in our churches that are just gifted that way, and we have to get them to rise and say, this is a spiritual gift. It's needed in the world, and we need to give you an atmosphere where that can thrive and flourish.
That spoken word that Pastor Byron did last night with the video, that was epic. I mean, you could put that anywhere in the world. That was creative genius. From the writing of the words, the videography, I mean, that was stunning. Well done.
I love actually just watching you two in sync. I mean, like last night was a good example of that too. How you just you say something and you finish the sentence and then you carry on and then you add little bits and pieces and that. And I think any married couple here is going, how do you do that? How do you?
Or is it just the fact that Nikki has no clue what I'm thinking? I don't know what she's thinking.
Yeah, that's because Trev's thinking.
It's all my
this way.
fault. I'll own it.
Trev's thinking that way. I'm thinking that we're just two such completely different people. But it's so wonderful to see. And I think in leadership, there must be something that you guys do, or practices that you do, or conversations that you have that fosters that kind of unity, that kind of relationship in terms of, being married and serving God together. What do you do? How do you make that happen so beautifully?
She's Latin, she's right, I'm wrong.
I would say you have to celebrate each other's strengths
So good.
verbally and often. So when Glenn gets off the platform, or if he does anything, and he has got so many gifts and so many strengths, it's easy, isn't it, to get familiar and just go, you've just done what you've done. But I make it a priority for myself as a wife, as his partner, to say, that was brilliant. And not only brilliant, but I'll say exactly why I thought. And that bit that you said there, that was phenomenal. And what you did with that person and you lifted them up, that was amazing. And so it is one of my priorities is to celebrate everything that I think is uniquely him and that he does brilliantly.
So good.
And I think
Yeah, definitely the celebration of each other's strengths. So how do we work out her roles? We kind of have worked out after 27, 28 years of marriage. How long? 27 and a half years of marriage. We know what Soph's good at, which is way more than what I'm good at. So Soph leans into her strengths, I lean into my strengths, and the hope is that we're able to cover our weaknesses. It's like a dance. And where we are weak, that's where the team shine. But there's no wrestling. There's no jockeying for position. We're not fighting with each other for either stage time, for title, for recognition. It's a joy to watch her do what she does. And I think when you take delight in watching each other do what they're gifted to do, I love taking my little puppy for a walk. Watching in fact, I love my dog more than I love my kids, I think. I mean, it's amazing, But watching the puppy, like on Sunday morning, watching the puppy run through the long grass, that right there, the joy that gives me, is in small part the joy that I get from watching Sophie do what she does. Good. Watching my son and daughter do what they do, mostly behind the scenes for them. And I think celebrating that is genuinely the answer to longevity in marriage, in ministry.
Thank you. And it's evident. Yes. It really is evident in each of you. Thank you for that. Our time is gone. 1 30-second answer for each of you. If there was one thing you should have created, or would have liked to have created earlier on in your life in leadership, what would it have been? 30 seconds.
Permission to have fun and be less focused on what other people think. In my years as a youth pastor, I was raised a second generation Pentecostal. I was raised being more concerned about other people. Now I genuinely not really bothered.
Soph?
I would say nurturing and meaningful friendships.
Wow, yeah.
That go beyond just friendship, but to have those people in my world to create that community that know what is going on, that pray for me, that celebrate me, that walk me through some of the challenges in my life. I've done it kind of alone, and I've done it with, and I know which one I prefer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Nikki. Come on, stand to your feet. What a great team. Thank you so much, everyone. Come on, give them a huge cheer. That's amazing.